Thank you, Charlie. Great to be with you. Happy Derby, everybody. You know, we got a great illustration today, and we see it almost every year, just how difficult it is to get there. Last night, everything was possible. We had the draw for post positions for the Kentucky Derby, one of the important moments of the week, one of the most memorable moments of the week, a little nerve-wracking for some owners and trainers, but at the end of the evening, by 6 p.m., you could take a small sigh and exhale ever so slightly and say, we know where we're starting from, we're in the gate, let's see what happens on Saturday. And then came Thursday morning, and Opportunity was not walking real well in his barn. Has a little bruise on the foot, going to be fine, might run in the Preakness. Worst possible timing for getting into the Kentucky Derby. In no way a major injury, but enough to knock him out of the Kentucky Derby. This is not an infrequent thing. In 2009, when Mind That Bird, the little 50-to-1 long shot, now a movie star, won the Kentucky Derby, the favorite in the race, I Want Revenge, was scratched that morning. Got to the day of the race and scratched that morning. And back through the history of the race, some of the greatest runnings of the race. 1992, when Pat Day won his one and only Kentucky Derby aboard the long shot Lily T. And there was a horse named Arazi in there. There was a huge favorite. He was from France. He didn't run well on that day, but there was another horse who had been entered in the race named AP Indy, who went on to be the horse of the year, went on to win the Breeders' Cup Classic. He won the Belmont Stakes by 8 lengths. But he, too, came up with a bruise on the morning of the Kentucky Derby and didn't get to run in that Derby. Who knows how history might have changed that he had been in there. And you go back to 1957, which a lot of people regard as the greatest Derby of all time, at least in terms of talent. A horse named Iron Liege won the Kentucky Derby. Iron Liege was from famed Calumet Farm, but he wasn't a big horse in that stable. He really wasn't the one that everybody thought would win the race. That horse was General Duke. They were both entered in the race, and General Duke was to have been ridden by Bill Hartack, who won 5 Kentucky Derbies, but at that time had not won any Kentucky Derbies. General Duke came up with an injury the day before the race, scratched on the morning of the race. Bill Hartack slides over to Little Iron Liege, who wins the race because Bill Shoemaker, maybe the greatest jockey of all time, misjudged the finish line on Gallant Man as he was flying down the home stretch, and Shoe stands up at the 16th pole instead of the 16th of a mile away at the finish line where you're supposed to be, and realized the error instantly, got back down on his horse and started scrubbing on him, started running, and he fell just about this far short. So the lesson is you can never really get comfortable when you have a Kentucky Derby horse and you're trying to get to 6:32 post time for the Derby on the first Saturday in May. Even to the morning of the race, even the hours leading up to the race, and then they slide in the starting gate, and then things really get interesting. I mean, that's the joy of owning these horses and chasing the dream that is the Kentucky Derby. One of the greatest dreams, certainly the thing that fuels our business on a daily basis. Anybody who's in our business, owner, trainer, jockey, breeder, bettor, racetrack official, you get up in the morning and you're looking down the road to the first Saturday in May, and you're wondering, when you see these young horses come out, you see the yearlings go through the sales ring at Keeneland or Fasig-Tipton in Lexington or Fasig-Tipton in New York or any of the great sales companies that are around the world. The thought has crossed somebody's mind with each of those horses, is this the one? Might this be the one that gets me there? This year there were 23,000 of those horses foaled in this country. 23,000, as we say in racing, hit the ground 3 years ago and started their journey toward this day. By the time they got to early this year, when they turned 3 years old, remember horses have a universal birthday in terms of competition. Everybody has a birthday on the first day of the year, although their foaling dates may have been different. Opportunity, in fact, was trying to make some history. Opportunity for Bob Baffert, and he was the second choice in the betting. I mean, this is a big loss for the field in the Kentucky Derby. Opportunity was trying to break history, break a long historic streak that has maybe the last bit of conventional wisdom left in trying to find a way to either promote or eliminate a horse in the Kentucky Derby, and that is this: no horse since a horse named Apollo has won the Kentucky Derby without racing at the age of 2. Racing before December 31st that previous year. That record dates back to 1882. It stands pretty solid. And Opportunity, who made his first start in his career on January 4th of this year, was going to try to break that, and he was the second choice in the Kentucky Derby. He had a great chance to do it and a great chance to provide Bob Baffert with his 4th Kentucky Derby victory. But it's just difficult to get there. So we'll wish Opportunity well, and we'll wish him a happy birthday, because he'll actually turn 3 on May 7th. He's not quite there yet, and he'll have some good days ahead of him, but not a Kentucky Derby day. That's one of the things that has made it so special over the years. And it's that tension, it's that you know, inability to catch your breath, especially this time of year, as the moment draws closer, and the anticipation, and you know, the heart starts pounding. And you get to see that every year when Charlie Oberst waits for me to arrive at this event. He gets a little nervous every year. That's part of my duty. It's maybe a subliminal thing, though, to just give you an idea of how it feels to be in the ring and with that horse when you see Charlie sweating. But like, I'm just glad somebody is so happy to see me when I hit the top of those steps. So that's a good thing. It's going to be an exciting Kentucky Derby even without Opportunity. By the way, in terms of what we do, that we have now what is called an also eligible list. So we have the 20 horses that are entered for the Derby. If there are any entered beyond that, they go on to an also eligible list. That means if a horse scratches, they can draw into the field. And we had one of the also eligibles this year, a horse named Pablo Del Monte, and we think he's going to go in. He is eligible to go in now. His trainer hasn't made the 100% decision. Whatever has happened, he's paid his $25,000 entry fee. He ain't getting that back, so that goes into the purse. So he might as well run. Of course, he has to pay another $25,000 to start, so it's not an easy thing. But Pablo Del Monte does draw in if he decides to go. Not a definite that he's going to go, but he will be in post number 20. And if you're wondering about post positions, Opportunity was what? He was the 11. So he'll draw into the field, and everybody will just kind of bump down one with Pablo Del Monte coming in. If there's another scratch before the Derby, say for instance 3 or 4 will scratch, then the horses would come out and leave a little space down on the rail for the horse that's down on the rail, who is Vickers in trouble, who may well be in trouble because of that post position. That might have been the only kind of ugly draw last night. So that's where we sit right now. It's a little unsettled in terms of the Derby field, but we do know that we have one of the heaviest favorites in years in California Chrome, who is not only an accomplished racehorse, not only the fastest horse of his generation, but he's the best story in this year's Kentucky Derby. I mean, sometimes, and I've told you this before, sometimes it's more profitable to just sniff out the best story and bet on that rather than sit and worry about handicapping and pace, because magical stories win the Kentucky Derby. And this year, that story is going to be played out on track in a way it's never been played out before. I'm super excited about this Derby for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's the Derby. It's the Oaks. I mean, it's what I live for. My place of business, where I get to go to work every morning, first thing I get to see is the Twin Spires in the morning. It's pretty impossible not to get fired up over that vision every day. It takes me back to the day as a freshman in high school when I rode a bus from Elizabethtown, Kentucky. My mother could drive to Louisville. I told her I needed to go to the racetrack. I love the Derby. She could drive to Shively to my aunt's house not 1 inch farther, so she decided to put me on a bus in Elizabethtown. I had an aunt and uncle pick me up, and they took me to the track on a cold November day. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And when I will never forget the moment I saw those Twin Spires. We came in off of Longfield Avenue, and I got to see them in the distance. And I think of that every day when I drive in there. It's a magical thing. I'm the luckiest guy in the world to be there and be part of this. So I'm pretty pumped when this event comes around every year anyway. But this year I'm really excited about a couple of new things. And one you've seen a lot of. The other project many of you haven't seen yet. But much of the talk until at least now, when we're really focused on the horses, has been a new TV screen that we have at our place. So we call it the big board. 15,224 square feet of 4K video. It's absolutely the sharpest of the cutting edge. It's state-of-the-art technology. And it will solve one lingering issue. Of all the years I've been to the Kentucky Derby, all of them I've been to, I've heard one common comment, sometimes a complaint, sometimes just lamenting that, you know, I went to the infield on Derby Day and I had a great time, but I never saw a horse. You're going to see a horse now in the infield on Kentucky Derby Day, and he's going to be 70 feet tall. You're going to get a clear vision of the horse on this screen. This screen is, I expected big, I expected clear. I did not expect this big. I did not expect this clear. If any of you were there at opening night, you got a chance to see it, and we tweaked it a little bit since then. But it's a phenomenal piece of machinery that I think is going to change, and I hope lift the Derby experience for a lot of people, specifically those in the infield, for whom we haven't made a whole lot of allowances for creature comforts over the years. You know, you pay your $50, you get to go in there, you get to witness some part of every aspect of Western civilization. It's on display in there at some point among those 60,000 people or so that are there on Derby Day. But again, you know, unless you're one of the guys that's in there early, you know, I'll never forget walking in a few years ago. I'm walking through the tunnel just when the gates open at 8 o'clock, and the first I hear footsteps pounding behind me. I'm walking over from the barns, hear footsteps pounding behind me, and I look over my shoulder, and here comes a guy dressed in a silver suit with a purple fez on his head, and he's hanging onto the fez and going to his spot somewhere. He's got one reserved somewhere. We know over the years some people have made special arrangements, let's say in advance, to enjoy their infield experience. I remember a few years back we had some steeplechase races at church. I don't know if you remember that. A few years back we had some of the jumpers in, and part of the jump sets tradition is to have a picnic in the infield, and so we had some guys out there in the infield, and we noticed a couple of them strayed over like toward the outside rail, and our security guys were watching them. They were doing something. We couldn't see what they were doing. This was about mid-June, and finally one of our guys went over to see them and kind of walked up behind them, and they were very, very busy, and what they were doing is they were burying booze for next year's Kentucky Derby. I'm not sure how hard these guys worked in college, but if they put that much into it, that much foresight into it, our country would probably be a better country. But I'm thrilled that they're so excited about being there. But it's, the infield experience is a special experience. But now with this screen, you're going to have that experience, the fellowship that the infield is, but also you're going to be able to see what's going on around you, not just with the race, but the programming on that screen, which will be on every day of the races throughout the year at Churchill Downs. And for special events, we plan to work it into business events and gatherings. And if the Rolling Stones ever come back again, Mick Jagger's lips will be bigger than they have ever been in the history of rock and roll. So we're going to use it for a lot of things. But also the presentation on that day will be, and those days, Oaks and Derby days, will be to give the people in the infield and anybody watching anywhere in the track, and almost every seat can view the screen, is that you're going to see the whole experience. We're going to take you to the red carpet. We're going to take you to Millionaire's Row. We won't take you to the mansion. They changed the locks on it last week, so I can't get in. We don't get into the mansion very often. But every other aspect of what we do, the celebrities, the paddock scenes, things you could not normally see from the infield, you're going to get a taste of it now. And we hope that adds to the experience. And we'll be doing things like that through the years. But I just love how I believe it will change the infield experience, which is, for many people, your first taste of the Kentucky Derby or the Kentucky Oaks. So I'm excited about that. Also excited about a project we have in the grandstand, where we have spent the big screen cost $12 million. And the new project in the upper part of the grandstand, upper part of the home stretch, is a $17 million project, and the end result is called the Grandstand Terrace. What we've done there is we've added 50,000 feet of space up there. That includes a large deck in the back of the grandstand that has gathering space, food and beverage, wagering windows. We've added about 2,400 seats that, for my money, if I was going to pick out one seat from which to watch the Kentucky Derby, it would be one of, they're not undercover, but they're stadium-style flip-up seats with the cup holder. And they go all the way to the starting gate, all the way to the quarter pole. So somebody who bought one of those seats in our online sale back in November, sight unseen, not knowing exactly what they would look like, because we had no pictures. We hadn't built the darn things yet, but we sold them. But there are 2,400 seats there, and people who are sitting right at that starting gate are looking from the second and third floors. They're going to have an unprecedented view of that incredible start and the roar of the crowd, and one of the most important parts of the race right there. And more important to me as a race fan, you've got an incredible view from the half-mile pole, which is just before you go in the far turn, all the way around the turn. You're looking right up these horses' noses as they come around the turn, all the way to the 8th pole, midway to the home stretch. And the Derby is generally won by the time they get to the 8th pole. So the most pivotal, most important moves, you would have seen Calvin Burrell pass 18 horses. He started at the 8th pole, and by the time, at the half-mile pole, by the time he got to the 8th pole, he had passed on Mind That Bird 18 horses, more than any horse had ever passed in the history of the Kentucky Derby, and went on to win by nearly 7 lengths at 50-1. All that happened in that space, which again for me is the most important part of the race. And then, you know, if you got any doubts, you watch them on the big screen home. It's a beautiful seat. And we had some fans up there, got them today on what we have now dubbed Thurby. We have a new Derby tradition today. We're calling it Thurby, and there was a huge crowd going in there today. I think we're looking to focus on regional foods and regional music. And the Oaks used to be Louisville's day at the races. We had fewer than 50,000 people at the Oaks in 1980. A little different picture now. It's tougher to get a ticket. We had 113,000 there last year. And Thursday has grown. We had about 25,000 people there last year. Now we're trying to focus and make it a little more special for that. So some of the Thurby visitors will get to go up there, but it's just a great place to watch the races. We've got food and beverage. We have recreated a paddock that was built in 1903 that I didn't even know was still standing. All the years I've been there, the paddock was part of a rooftop behind the grandstand. It stood from all the Derby horses were saddled in there from 1903 till 1926. And when we were clearing the space away, we tried to save the original paddock for history. We took it down. We were wanting to rebuild it. It was a wooden paddock, but the fire marshal said, no, you're not going to do that. So we recreated it. It's up there. It's a large covered area. And most important, this may be the most important thing I could ever tell you about this Kentucky Derby. If you are seated anywhere in the grandstand, or you have been, every restroom has been completely gutted, overhauled, and replaced, and we have new restroom positions. The restroom was, thank you. You can't imagine what celebratory news this is. I mean, those had not been touched much since the 1950s. And so they're all new. We've got 400 positions, 55% for women. So I know the number's still not big enough, but we're listening a little bit. But it's a great, and I could not be more excited about that section again, because now with these projects this year, since 2001, we've spent nearly $180 million in investment on that racetrack, from the big renovation we had to everything that's happened since then. But I love these projects because they touch people that have not been touched by those previous projects, whether it's 60,000 people in the infield or those people in the grandstand. They've got a grand new area to celebrate this great experience, and so I am pumped for this Kentucky Derby, to put it mildly. So hope you get a chance to enjoy those facilities and amenities at some point, and let me know what you think, because I'm truly excited. But the races themselves are tremendous. The Derby with California Chrome, unknown horse 3 months ago, wasn't on the radar screen. First Derby future wager he appeared in, he went off at 32-1. Now he's at 5-2. He's going to be the biggest favorite since Big Brown in 2008, who's the most dominant winner I've seen, and now 33 Kentucky Derbies that I've witnessed. This will be my 34th, I think, Kentucky Derby this year, but as either as a reporter or working at Churchill. But California Chrome's a wonderful horse, and he is the dream that attracts us all to the business, because he is, whether he gets it done or not, the fact that he is in this position is proof that a business is built on dreams can really happen. He is owned by a couple of businessmen in California who had gotten into a racing partnership, just a tiny part of a partnership, and I think they own 5% of a mare, and the partnership was going to sell this mare, and they decided they wanted to buy her. They wanted to go all in and own a horse on their own, and so the partnership said, we'll sell her to you for $8,000. So they were cutting the deal, they were in the barn, they were looking at the horse, and as they were doing so, a groom with another horse walks past. He knows him, walks past with the horse on the shank, and he looks at him and he says, this is the exact quote, he says, anybody who would pay $8,000 for that horse is a dumbass. That was the exact quote. These guys, they were not deterred. You know, horse racing people were frequently wrong, but never in doubt. They moved on forward and bought the horse for $8,000. They decided to breed her. They took her to a stallion named Lucky Pulpit, who stands for a stallion fee of $2,500 in California. His best race ever was a win at 5/8 of a mile on the grass at Arlington Park in Chicago to win the Kentucky Derby, which they were not even thinking of. You have to run 10 furlongs. You've got to run 1.25 miles on dirt on the first Saturday in May against the 19 best 3-year-olds in the world. So they weren't thinking Kentucky Derby, but the offspring of this really a bargain basement mating, $8,000 mare, $2,500 stallion, turns out to be California Chrome, who has won 4 races in a row. He dominated the Santa Anita Derby. He is by far the fastest member of his generation, at least to this point. If you look at speed figures, numbers, anything about it, he's the fastest horse of this group, and they have turned down $6 million for him. They've had one offer of $6 million, and they said no thanks. Also adding to the romance of that story, so that's an incredible dream story. Also adding to the romance is trainer Art Sherman. Art Sherman is 77 years old. This is his first horse he will saddle in the Kentucky Derby, but he's been here before. Back in 1955, he was the exercise rider for a horse named Swaps, who won the Kentucky Derby, one of only 3 California-bred horses to win the Derby. And here he brings back California Chrome, who was bred in California, trying to make that history and close that loop for him, that personal historic loop that goes back to the '55 Derby. And there's a lot of romance in that story, and you're going to love these owners because they are in no way taking themselves seriously. They now refer to themselves as the Dumbass Partners. They very, very proudly wear that title. On their silks, there is a fairly inelegant jackass on the back of their silks. I'm anxious to see that in the winner's circle if they get there. And they also have the horse wears blinkers with the initials DAP on there. So they're very, very proud of that. And you know, if we ran the race on paper, we wouldn't have to run the race on paper because he's Link's the best. We do not run the Kentucky Derby on paper, so there's reason to look for some other horses in this race. But he would certainly be a wonderful story, and wonderful stories find themselves in the winner's circle on Derby Day. But if you don't want California Chrome at 5-2, if you look back in the history of the Kentucky Derby and see a lot of great horses, not just the ones I mentioned, but horses like in 1967, Damascus, one of the best horses of the 20th century, showed up on Derby Day, caught a muddy track, finished an inexplicable third, never ran a race like that again, went on to be horse of the year, beat the best older horses in the country, and one of the top 20 horses of the 20th century, but wasn't there on Derby Day. I know I've shared the story with you over the years of Native Dancer back in 1953. He's my best example of just how difficult it is to win this race because he got into the starting gate and he had every advantage. Again, this was 1953. He was owned by Alfred Gwynn Vanderbilt, one of the wealthier people in the country, and had a great stable, and all of his horses had every advantage. They had all the best trainers, all the best jockeys, the best food, the best of everything, and Mr. Vanderbilt chased that Kentucky Derby dream, and he sent Native Dancer, who was the first television star in thoroughbred racing. He was a gray horse. They called him a gray ghost, had a great national following. He shows up here, goes off at 4-5 odds. They break from the starting gate. He gets out of the hair slowly, but recovers. Again, that start's very important. Flying down the home stretch, he's moving over under his jockey, Eric Guerin. He's trying to save a little ground into that first turn. As he gets to the first turn, a horse named Money Broker comes out and slams right into him. Nothing intentional. They're 3-year-old thoroughbreds. If you equate them to human athletes, they're teens and early 20s. You know, their bones are still coming together, the muscle's still coming together, the brain is not always there. Anybody who's got teenagers or has ever been around one, you know, that's what we're dealing with here. And then they're dealing with big crowds, all the things that come together. So Money Broker comes out and hits him. He drops back about 5 lengths in a race in which a nose can mean everything. Down the back stretch, he's trying to get running again, but everywhere he goes, it's like your worst day on the Watterson Expressway. Even the old Watterson Expressway, when the ramps were like this, it was trouble. Everywhere he went, it was slammed shut. Finally, on the far turn, he gets running. He starts picking up horses. Turns for home. There's one horse in front of him. A horse named Dark Star, who was a long shot at about 25-1. He's flying there. And horses that get on the lead by themselves, they get brave. You know, if you're ever running a 10K race and another human runs up next to you, no matter how comfortable you are, you start pressing a little bit. You know, you think, I got this guy. It happened to me once in a 10K race where an 11-year-old kid, I think, ran up next to me. And I was cruising along. I was thinking I was having a pretty good day, and I looked over, So I stepped it up a little bit, and he stepped it up a little bit, and I stepped it up a little bit more, and he stepped it up a little bit more. I quit stepping it up, and he just left me in the dust, and I was forced to deal with questions of mortality I was not expecting that day. But that's the way horses do. When they get out lonesome, they get out by themselves, they get brave, and he got brave, and he was cruising, and Dark Star was on the lead. Native Dancer was running at him. Every step in the stretch, he's getting closer and closer and closer. Unbeaten horse, major Derby favorite coming in. And as they hit the wire, Dark Star wins by about this much. And Native Dancer, in his career, ran 22 times, and he won 21 of them. The only one he didn't win was the Kentucky Derby. And again, he's on the short list of the greatest horses of the last 100 years, but couldn't get it done on Derby Day. His trainer, Bill Winfrey, said they shouldn't run a race that Native Dancer can't win. We've got one, though. It's called the Kentucky Derby, and that's part of the reason it's so alluring, it's so special. Once-in-a-lifetime chance, 3-year-olds only, one afternoon on the first Saturday in May. So, and Mr. Vanderbilt chased the dream for another 40 years and never caught it. So that's how difficult it is. That's how special it will be for somebody on Saturday. Some other names quickly in this year's Kentucky Derby. If you're going to try to beat California Chrome, I think you look at a few special horses here, and especially some horses that seem to be doing their best. And one special note about this Kentucky Derby is we have 4 horses that are owned at least in part by Louisvillians. This race has been run here now for 140 years, Lord willing, on Saturday. The last Louisville-owned horse to win the Kentucky Derby was Old Rosebud in 1914. Been a long time between drinks. We got 4 of them this time. One is Intense Holiday, owned by a partnership headed by Louisville native Jack Wolf. Louisville attorney Ed Glasscock and his son Clint are part of that partnership, but it's a big clump of Louisvillians in that partnership. That's one of the horses. Another is a horse named Ride On Curlin, owned by a local furniture man in the furniture business, Dan Doherty. Purchased this colt for $25,000. He was a scrawny. He was like the skinniest kid in freshman class. His legs are all pointing in the wrong directions. He's a grown man now. He's got Calvin Burrell in the saddle. He's got a shot for Doherty. And then we've got a horse named Harry's Holiday, owned by a couple of local partnerships, and a horse that was just purchased this week by some Louisvillians, a horse named General A-Rod. So 4 horses with local connections, and I think that one of the major players in this race is Intense Holiday. Training beautifully, had a brilliant work last week. You always look for the horse that's doing his best that week. It was absolutely a spectacular work, and I think he's if for some reason California Chrome doesn't show up, he's the horse to beat in here. There's a horse named Danza. Danza coming off a win in the Arkansas Derby. He was 41-1 in his last race. One of the favorites now for the Kentucky Derby for trainer Todd Pletcher, who also trains Intense Holiday. Danza is, yes, named after actor Tony Danza, which is a fine thing. He's going to, Danza's going to be here. You know him from Taxi and Who's the Boss. Frankly, I think if you're thinking Derby with a horse, maybe you should name him De Niro or Daniel Day-Lewis or something. I don't know. But Tony's a great, he's going to be here. He'll add to the picture. And that name Danza will look awfully good on our wall if he wins the Kentucky Derby. No horse has looked better at our place since he got here. The last 2 weeks, he's a shiny red guy. He's just bouncing and his muscles are rippling. And he looks like he's ready for a special effort. And a lot of times those horses signal those special efforts. And then there's Wicked Strong, who I think has a huge chance to win the race. As of yesterday, he drew the outside post. Now he's in 19, but he's going to be coming from far back anyway. And he is another horse with a great story in that he was named in honor of the Boston Marathon bombing victims from a year ago. They wanted to name him Boston Strong, but that was already taken, so they used Wicked Strong, and the Bostonians, frankly, seem to like that better. And a portion of his earnings from the Derby or any other race go to a fund called the One Fund that supports victims of that disaster and that tragedy. And he comes from a long racing family. Last year we had a romantic Kentucky Derby where a Kentuckian named Shug McGahee, Hall of Fame trainer, won the Kentucky Derby. The family involved in this horse is the Jerkins family. The son is Jimmy Jerkins, who's in his first Kentucky Derby. But his father, Alan Jerkins, is a true racing legend who's never won the Derby. He rarely gets out of the state of New York. But in the state of New York, he beat Secretariat twice in his Triple Crown year. So he's a legend. Those are some of the horses to look at. If you're looking at a couple of just pure long shots to have a lot of fun with, look at Commanding Curve, who's 50-1 in the morning line. Last year when I was here, one of the few bits of wisdom I gave you is that a horse named Golden Soul would run pretty well, and he ran second at about 35-1. This horse is out of the same stable. I think he's kind of coming up to the race sneaky good, and he might be okay for the race. But it's going to be a fun race. Last year's winner was a very popular winner, Orb, who got the Kentucky Derby done. Did it for McGahee and for one of the oldest old money families in thoroughbred racing, the Phipps family. And the Phipps family have been trying to win the Kentucky Derby since 1923. And again, another of those stories, we've got every advantage, all the money. As somebody said, the Phipps and Janney families who own that horse, said, a buddy of mine said, those guys are not the 1%. They are the guys, and they run the Bessemer Trust Company, said those are the guys that loan money to the 1%. So they had some advantages, and that makes this year's tale of California Chrome and a Ride On Curl and all those other horses that have come from wherever they come from. A good horse can come from anywhere, and we see that most often on Derby Day. And the thing I love about it more than anything is that we do see that happen. Sometimes it's the best horse, sometimes it's the richest horse, sometimes it's the most expensive horse, but more often than not, it's a Mind That Bird at 50-1, or it's California Chrome's partners in California with this bargain basement pedigree that come in here and get it done on under the brightest spotlight on the biggest stage. So here comes the dramatic moment, the horse that you will get to eliminate, as I am something of a local legend for my inability to pinpoint a Kentucky Derby winner. I might have him in the neighborhood, but pinpointing Kentucky Derby winner is another thing. Why you continue to listen to me baffles me. It gives me a great indication of why Mayor Greg Fisher is right when he calls this America's most compassionate city, that you will come back every year and talk to me about this. So, but I'm going to try to beat California Chrome here, not because I don't love the story, but I think the race sets up for an upset. I think he's got a great post position. I mean, a lot of things are going well, but he got here late, and he's got to overcome the same hurdles everybody else does. New distance, 160,000 people. He's reported to be a little nervous sometimes in his training, and also he's got to face 19 horses for the first time in his life. And at 5-2, that's not a good wager for me. I'm going to take Intense Holiday. I did tell Ed Glasscock this, and he did not file legal action against me, so it's a good thing. I think this horse is doing super well, got a running style to get it done, and I think has a great chance to get some Louisvillians home in the Derby. My second choice is Wicked Strong. I really like this horse. He's come together late, but he's got all the ability. Big late charge, 19 post for my money. He's not going to bother him. He's going to be way back there anyway, hoping for a hot pace. And a couple of others underneath. I think Danza is impossible to ignore. He just looks so good and so ready to go, and his last race was really a brilliant performance. And then there's a horse named Medal Count that I think will run at a big price. He's trained by Louisvillian Dale Romans, who really grew up at Churchill Downs to the side of his father, a veteran trainer, Jerry Romans, who never dreamed about winning the Kentucky Derby. He trained cheap claiming horses, but his son might achieve the seemingly impossible on Derby Day with Medal Count. So hope you guys have a great Kentucky Derby. Our Oaks is a wonderful race too. Big favorite in there, filly named Untappable. I'm going to pick an upset in there with a horse named Unbridled Forever. She's 12-1 in the morning line, has no business being that long, loves our racetrack. So have fun. I'll leave you the words of the late Mike Berry, always do, former writer for the Louisville Times, the Kentucky Irish American. Mike, think of what we talked about here. Think of the native dancer stories and the Damascus stories and the Mind That Bird stories. And when Mike went to the racetrack, he said, this was his credo. He said, I hope I break even. I need the money. And that kind of sums it up for all of us. It's not a thing that makes great sense, but it's beautiful and never more beautiful than Derby Day.